Our world, this beautiful blue marble spinning in the vastness of space, was not always so inviting. Its story begins an almost unimaginably long time ago, about 4.5 billion years in the past. Imagine for a moment, a time before time as we know it, when our sun was just a young developing star. Around it swirled a colossal cloud of gas and dust, the leftover materials from its own birth. This cloud was a chaotic cosmic nursery, filled with tiny particles of rock filled with tiny particles of ice all tumbling and colliding in the darkness. It was from this cosmic dust that our home was destined to be born, a process of magnificent slow-motion creation. Over millions of years, something remarkable began to happen within this swirling disk of debris. Gravity, that invisible persistent force, started to pull these small particles together. Tiny grains of dust clumped to form pebbles. Pebbles crashed into each other to become rocks, and these rocks gathered into larger and larger boulders. This process, called accretion, was like a cosmic snowball effect, growing ever larger and more powerful. The larger these bodies became, the stronger their gravitational pull, attracting even more material. It was a violent and chaotic construction, a relentless bombardment that would eventually forge a planet from countless smaller pieces, a world built from the remnants of stars. This fledgling Earth was a truly hellish place, a far cry from the green and blue world we know today. It was a molten sphere of liquid rock, a glowing orb heated to extreme temperatures by the constant collisions and the decay of radioactive elements deep within its core. Volcanoes erupted with unimaginable fury, spewing lava across its entire surface, while asteroids and comets from the chaotic young solar system continued to rain down from the heavens. This was the Hadean Aeon, a name fittingly derived from Hades, the underworld of ancient myth. It was a world of fire and brimstone, an infant planet still glowing with the fierce heat of its formation. There were no oceans, no continents, and certainly no air to breathe. The atmosphere, if one could call it that, was a toxic mix of gases, carbon dioxide, nitrogen, and water vapor, all vented from the planet's volcanic interior. It was a suffocating, crushing blanket unlike anything we could survive in. Yet even in this seemingly inhospitable furnace, the seeds of our world's future were being sown. The very comets and asteroids that scarred its surface delivered precious elements and, most importantly, water, locked away as ice. The stage was being set for the next extraordinary chapter in Earth's story, a transformation from a ball of fire to a world of water. For millions of years, the Earth remained a molten inferno, but slowly, inexorably, a great change began. As the relentless bombardment from space lessened, the planet finally had a chance to cool. The immense heat from its formation started to radiate away into the cold emptiness of space. This cooling process was incredibly gradual, taking place over an immense timescale that dwarfs human history. As the surface temperature dropped below the boiling point of water, the vast quantities of water vapor began to condense, forming thick, heavy clouds. A rainstorm of epic proportions followed, a deluge lasting thousands or millions of years. Water poured from the skies in torrents, cascading onto newly solidified volcanic rock. The storm filled basins and craters, giving rise to the first global ocean. A primordial sea, warm and rich in dissolved minerals, formed, a crucible for life. It was within these ancient sunlit waters that the greatest miracle took place. Around 3.8 billion years ago, the first simplest forms of life appeared. Complex chemical compounds assembled into self-replicating molecules. These were the ancestors of life. Single-celled organisms emerged, bacteria, archaea, tiny microscopic specks of life. Earth was alive. Among these early life forms, cyanobacteria developed photosynthesis. They harnessed the sun's energy to make food. As a byproduct, they released oxygen. For millions of years, oxygen was absorbed by iron in the oceans, forming rusted layers. Eventually, the oceans couldn't absorb more. Oxygen began to seep into the atmosphere. The Great Oxidation Event harmed many early organisms, but it paved the way for complex air-breathing life. For billions of years, life remained a relatively simple affair, confined to the safety of the oceans. But beneath the waves, evolution was tirelessly at work, experimenting with new and more complex forms. About 540 million years ago, something extraordinary happened: the Cambrian explosion. In a relatively short burst of geological time, the diversity of life exploded. The oceans, once dominated by simple microbes, suddenly teemed with a bewildering array of multicellular animals. Creatures with hard shells appeared, creatures with jointed legs appeared, creatures with primitive eyes appeared. It was as if nature's creativity had been suddenly unleashed. filling every available niche in the marine world. This burst of innovation produced the ancestors of many animal groups we know today. Trilobites that scuttled along the seafloor. Strange swimming creatures unlike anything alive now. The oceans were now a complex ecosystem of predators and prey. Meanwhile, oxygen being pumped into the atmosphere by tiny organisms was having a profound effect. High in the sky, it formed the ozone layer, a protective shield blocking ultraviolet radiation. For the first time, land surfaces were becoming safe for life. The first pioneers onto this new frontier were humble plants. Descended from algae in shallow coastal waters, they began creeping onto rocky shores around 470 million years ago. At first they were simple, moss-like growths, clinging to damp soil. Over time they evolved roots to anchor themselves. They grew stems to reach for sunlight. They developed vascular systems to transport water. Forests of giant ferns and primitive trees spread across the continents, transforming bare rock into a world of green. They changed the climate and created new habitats, preparing the way for animals. The first animals crawled out of the water to explore this green world. The first land animals were likely arthropods, millipedes, spiders, giant insects. Soon after, amphibians, vertebrates with lungs evolved from lobe-finned fish, began to emerge from the swamps. They were tied to the water, needing to return to lay eggs, but they were a crucial step. Life was no longer confined to the sea. The continents were alive, buzzing with insects and croaking with the first land-dwelling vertebrates, setting the stage for the next great chapter. Following the colonization of the land, a new type of animal evolved from the amphibians, the reptiles. They possessed a key innovation, the amniotic egg. This self-contained, leathery-shelled egg allowed them to lay their young on dry land, freeing them completely from the water. This evolutionary leap enabled reptiles to conquer the interiors of the continents, spreading far and wide across the supercontinent known as Pangaea. For millions of years they diversified into a stunning variety of forms, but one particular group was destined to become the undisputed rulers of the planet. These were the dinosaurs, the terrible lizards. The Triassic-Jurassic Cretaceous lasted for over 150 million years. It was an era of giants. Enormous, long-necked sauropods like Brachiosaurus browsed on the tops of tall trees, their footsteps shaking the ground. Ferocious predators like the mighty Tyrannosaurus rex with its bone-crushing jaws hunted colossal herbivores. The skies were not ruled by birds yet, but by flying reptiles called pterosaurs, which soared on leathery wings. The seas were home to massive marine reptiles like the ichthyosaurs, plesiosaurs. Dinosaurs were one of evolution's greatest success stories, dominating every ecosystem on Earth. Their world was vastly different from our own. It was warmer, with no polar ice caps, and the continents were slowly drifting apart towards their current positions. The landscape was covered in vast forests of conifers ferns, and later the first flowering plants began to appear, adding a splash of color to the endless green. For generation after generation, the dinosaurs thrived, adapting and evolving in this lush, prehistoric paradise. To any observer at the time, it would have seemed as though their reign would last forever. They were the masters of their world, powerful and seemingly invincible in their dominance over the planet. Then, 66 million years ago, this long-standing dynasty came to an abrupt and catastrophic end. A massive asteroid, estimated to be about 10 kilometers wide, slammed into the Earth in what is now the Gulf of Mexico. The impact was more powerful than all the world's nuclear weapons combined, triggering a global cataclysm. It caused immense earthquakes, continent-spanning tsunamis, and sent a cloud of superheated dust and debris high into the atmosphere. This cloud enveloped the planet, blocking out the sun for months, perhaps even years. The world was plunged into darkness in a deep, freezing winter, causing plants to wither and die, and the entire food chain to collapse. The age of the great dinosaurs was over. The cataclysm that wiped out the dinosaurs, along with about 75% of all species on Earth, was a moment of profound destruction. Yet from the ashes of this global disaster, new opportunities arose. While the giant reptiles had perished, these were the mammals. During the age of dinosaurs, mammals were mostly small, nocturnal, shrew-like creatures, living in the shadows and scurrying underfoot to avoid being eaten. Their small size and warm-blooded nature may have been the very things that helped them endure the long, dark winter that followed the asteroid impact. With the great dinosaurs gone, the world was suddenly an empty stage, full of vacant ecological roles waiting to be filled. The surviving mammals seized this opportunity with remarkable speed. In the millions of years that followed, they underwent an explosive radiation of their own, diversifying into an incredible array of shapes and sizes. Some returned to the seas, evolving into the ancestors of whales and dolphins. Others took to the air, becoming bats. On land, they evolved into fleet-footed grazers on the spreading grasslands, and powerful new predators to hunt them. The age of reptiles had given way to the age of mammals. Among the many new branches of the mammalian family tree, one group, the primates, took to a life in the trees. They evolved grasping hands, forward-facing eyes for judging distance, and larger brains. For many millions of years they thrived in the forests of Africa. Then, due to a changing climate, the forests began to shrink, replaced by open savanna. This environmental pressure prompted some primates to descend from the trees and adapt to a new life walking on two legs. This was a crucial step in our own evolutionary story, the beginning of the lineage that would eventually lead to modern humans, Homo sapiens. Our own species appeared remarkably recently in the grand scheme of Earth's history, just a few 100,000 years ago. We are newcomers on a very old planet, and just like the forces that came before us, we have become a major force for change. Earth is not a static museum piece, it is a dynamic living system that is constantly evolving. Volcanoes still erupt, continents continue to drift, and ice ages come and go. Today, human activity is driving change at an unprecedented rate, altering the climate and ecosystems in ways that will shape the next chapter of Earth's incredible 4.5 billion-year-old story. The journey is far from over.